ranking every NXT Tag Team Champion from worst to best. Number 13, Adrian Neville and Corey Graves. One of the great things about NXT is its fantastic tag team division, with tons of established tag teams that simply want to be tag teams, unlike the main roster, when most of the time, it is simply two people thrown together like the bar. Adrian Neville and Corey Graves is NXT's only example of a team randomly put together who have held the belts, and that really stands out when you compare them to the other teams on the list. Graves was actually working with Cassius Ohno until his injuries, and the two men only came together to deal with the Wyatt family, who both men had issues with. The team never really got going due to Graves' career-ending injury, and their short title run is often forgotten. Number 12, Lucha Dragons. In the ring, Kalisto and Sin Cara are both very talented wrestlers, and together as a tag team provided some high-paced, high-flying action that really changed things up in the tag team division, both in NXT and their subsequent run on the main roster. While they should have been a big deal after getting over with the fans, sadly, the Lucha Dragons never really took off in a way many had hoped for. After all, the Lucha Dragons were the team responsible for ending the record run of the Ascension against all the odds. However, just as shocking as their championship victory was their championship loss, when they randomly were defeated by Blake and Murphy. In between those two matches was the real problem with their 140-day run as champions, as they had no memorable feuds or matches. Number 11, the Vaudevillians. The Vaudevillians were a solid team in NXT that had a totally different gimmick to everyone else on the roster that totally set them apart, but sadly, it was one of those that was never going to work on the main roster, which saw them struggle once they left NXT. As champions, their run was sadly very forgettable, and they had very few memorable moments while holding the titles, and a lot of that could have been down to timing. WWE failed to pull the trigger on the team early enough, and instead gave them the belts when it was obvious that Enzo and Big Cass should have been champions. Whether it was because they were so character heavy that they didn't need the titles to elevate themselves any higher, or the fact they were only champions for 2 months, making it one of the shortest runs in NXT history, it just didn't live up to its potential. Number 10, the Wyatt Family. When you think about the Wyatt Family, most people immediately think about the group on the main roster, but the stable actually started back in the early days of NXT at a time when the tag team division was nowhere near as hot as it is today. Luke Harper and Eric Rowan were the tag team of the group and were placed as top heels who dominated everyone in their path. The only problem for the Wyatts, there wasn't enough top teams for them to actually feud with at the time, which means there's no classic feuds for people to go back and enjoy. Another issue with their reign is they beat a mock team of Neville and Bo Dallas after Oliver Gray suffered his injury, and their only feud against Cassius Ohno and Corey Graves was also impacted by Ohno's injury, meaning their feuds were never able to kickstart properly. Number 9, Blake and Murphy. In terms of in-ring quality, Blake and Murphy are often really overlooked in terms of former NXT Tag Team Champions due to the high number of incredible matches that took place following their run as champions between the likes of DIY and the Revival. But Blake and Murphy had their moments. Winning the titles from the Lucha Dragons came as a big surprise to most people, but the pair went on to have a 219-day run as champions. The problem with Blake and Murphy was that there was very little character development or reasons for fans to get behind them, either as faces or heels. Their title run was best remembered for being the start of Alexa Bliss' heel character, and there's no doubt she was the star of the group, hence why they can be seen as the greatest champions in history. Number 8, SAnity. SAnity is a fantastic stable and something totally different to anything we have seen before in NXT, with sheer madness being at the core of everything they do. With a real blend of styles between each member, the group are tons of fun to watch. However, because the group is so character driven, with that being the main focus of them, the NXT Tag Team Championships, and they didn't do much for the titles after taking them from the Authors of Pain. The group would eventually lose to Undisputed Era after a 123-day run as champions, where they put on several great NXT matches, but the actual run as champions is one that won't be remembered that well. Number 7, British Ambition. Many wrestling fans who didn't watch NXT in the early days might not know about British Ambition, and a lot of that is down to sheer bad luck, especially for Oliver Gray, one of the biggest what ifs in NXT history. Who knows what would have happened to this tag team had Gray not suffered a torn ligament. Gray and Neville were a fantastic tag team who were deserved champions and one of the very top teams in NXT during their time. Sadly, their tag team title run was cut short due to Gray's injury, meaning they only held the belts for just over a month. However, the reason they rank so highly is due to just how good they were as a team. British ambition personified what tag team champions should be, and the belts were only going to give them a boost to the next level had it not been for that injury. Number 6. American Alpha. Struggling on their own as singles wrestlers, Jason Jordan and Chad Gable came together to become an incredible tag team that electrified NXT with their huge personalities and fantastic in-ring work. To become one of the most beloved teams in history, NXT Creative did a smart job in keeping them away from the championship picture for as long as possible, until the fans made it clear that they couldn't wait any longer, and this kick-started their unbelievable feud with the Revival. American Alpha would be the team to dethrone the Revival at NXT TakeOver Dallas in one of the best tag team matches in NXT history, and it would be against the Revival where they dropped them before making their way to the main roster. Number 5. Undisputed Era. They might be the newest champions on this list, but the group has already done more for the titles than many of the teams on this list, bringing a totally different vibe to the belts and NXT in general. In terms of star power, the NXT championships have never been held by bigger names than the Undisputed Era group, who consists of 4 fantastic wrestlers in Roderick Strong, Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly, and Adam Cole. The group have brought an incredibly cool NWO feel, complete with Riley playing the belt like a guitar on the way to the ring. They have had some incredible matches already, including inside the War Game structure, and if they keep the titles for a long period of time, they could easily climb up the rankings in the future. Number 4. The Ascension. As the longest reigning NXT Tag Team Champions in history, it is pretty hard to overlook the Ascension, who dominated everything and everyone in their path during their time in the developmental brand. For those who didn't watch NXT during the time, you might question them being this high on the list. After all, the team really have been poor on the main roster, which is a huge shame, as when given a chance, they are fantastic. While there wasn't the overabundance of tag teams in NXT that there is today, they did have a great feud with the Usos and simply brought a new style and look to the company, and the fact they were as dominant as they were really helped put them over as a fantastic team. Number 3. DIY. From the long reigning Ascension to a shorter reign with DIY, they might not have held the belts for anywhere near as long as some of the other teams on this list, but Tommaso and Johnny Gargano had an incredible run as champions. The unlikely duo was a pair nobody have ever thought would get their hands on the titles, and their matches for the championships have created some of the greatest in tag team history, and it was so clear from the way they were portrayed that the duo were desperate to be champions. Their hard work and clear dedication to become champions meant that when they finally captured the titles, the entire NXT universe was fully behind them and invested like they have never been before. Number 2. Authors of Pain. When the Authors of Pain first arrived on the scene, many fans questioned whether the pair were too green to make it at the top level, yet every single time they entered the ring, they would prove people wrong with excellent match after excellent match, given being dominant and destructive was the only way to go. But the big men also sold to perfection, ensuring that every tag title match they had was superb, and with Paul by their side, Authors of Pain became a really rounded out team. The Authors of Pain had a very impressive 203-day reign as champions, and they put together an unforgettable time in NXT, where everything they did revolved around the championships. Number 1. The Revival. When it comes to NXT Tag Team Champions, the Revival are the teams that springs to mind after the 2 fantastic runs with the titles. The pair brought an old school style with traditional wrestling that saw them slow the pace down, cut the ring in half, and simply dominate their opponents. Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder might have been treated poorly on the main roster, but during their time in NXT, they were arguably the best tag team on the planet. Everything they did was about the titles, from the promos to their matches, and that put them and the championships over in a big way, putting on some of the greatest matches in NXT history. The Revival personified teamwork, saving each other at the last second, hitting incredible double team maneuvers, and backing up everything they said in the ring. They truly were an incredible team.